It's 2:08, time to start the live stream. I have the microphone on. All right, so this week's live stream is going to be, oh man, I hate the way I have my light set up. All right, whatever. We're just gonna make this work. I tried to make sure the tank looked kind of normal so you could see things, because I thought after we talk for a while, I'll get behind the camera and zoom in on the new frags and let you see them all. So that is what's happening today. We're gonna talk about coral placement. I was trying to check my channel to see when I talked about things last, and it appears that we didn't talk about planting corals on a reef for a very long time. I might have mentioned this or that, but we haven't had this as a topic in like 6 years, which is crazy to me. I feel like we're talking about the same things all the time, but how did we miss this topic? So last night I uploaded a reef diary, which you may have watched already, maybe you haven't. I got a whole bunch of corals yesterday evening from a friend who's local. My buddy Ryan, I've been friends with him, I don't know, 15 years or longer. He's a DFW Mass member. And he gave me, or he said, hey, do you want some frags? I'm coming over. And I said, okay. So, you know, you figure you'll get a few frags. And he showed up with 3 boxes of coral, which that's very misleading. One box was filled with treasure. One big box had like 2 big bags of water with large chunks. And then another box had some stuff in it. But he just didn't get it all into one. And so it was very impressive. It looked like I placed this giant order, but I did not. So I wanted to, you know, kind of clarify that one with you. It was very generous of him. He has a 1,000-gallon reef full of coral. And so when he snips things out, he probably doesn't even notice. It's probably not even a blip on his radar. And he was very generous. And I still thank him profusely. I thanked him today when he commented on last night's diary as well. So when it comes to placing the corals in the tank, I wanted to kind of talk about some techniques that work and kind of give you some insight. Now, the first thing you should do, and you know, look, a lot of you want to start a tank with brand new, you know, just pure water, dead sand, dead rock. You don't want anything to get in your tank. And then you go buy corals and you put them in your tank, and those corals have things on them. And when I asked Ryan, well, I didn't ask, I said, hey Ryan, so I'm planning to dip your corals. Do you see this being a problem? And he said, no, but you know, my stuff's clean. You don't have to worry about it. And he says, except I do have red planaria in my frag tank, but before I put these in the bags, I brushed them all off to make sure you didn't get any. And I thought, okay, that's good enough for me. I just went through so much with my reef. The last thing I want to do is introduce red planaria. So it's like, I'm going to skip that this time. I'm going to go ahead and do my coral dip. So I used that product called The Dip by Fauna Marin. I probably got the bottle 2 years ago, and it's kind of become my go-to. I like using it. I have Revive. I have a couple others, but The Dip works. It doesn't smell weird. It seems to do the job. I mean, I don't know. We put all of his corals through it. And I wanted to describe that because I said it kind of quickly in the diary, but it's really, there's a whole thing to dipping corals that should be considered and not be overlooked, because I think sometimes we make some really bad mistakes and the corals suffer because of it. So let's say you came home with 1 frag and you said, I need to dip it. You set a timer, you dip it, and then you blow it off with a turkey baster, and then you place it in your tank. Fine. But what if you come home with more than 1? What if you come home with 5? Or like Queen of Reef the other day, she posted on Instagram that she said, I wanted to get 1 frag, you know, like I'm just getting 1 acro was her goal. And she filmed panning across her tank, and I just started counting the bags floating. And it was something like 8 or 18 pieces, and I was like, 1 frag, huh? So think about that. You have 18 frags that need to be dipped. In my case yesterday, it was probably almost that many total when you think about it. It was probably at least a dozen. And so what I did was I grabbed a couple of buckets. So these are those 2-gallon buckets I like from Lowe's. And they're white, so you can see anything that comes off the coral, which is really good. And then I put 1 gallon of water in this, and I put the solution, The Dip, which for 1 gallon I needed 60 milliliters. And so I just squirted that in, mixed it around. Then I used my new Syncra Nano pump from Siche. This little guy is kind of awesome. Now, I showed it in a recent diary where I was using the vacuum attachment, and I thought, you know, this might be good to keep the water moving so that the chemical is not just sitting on the coral. The coral's not just sitting in a bath, but it's like keeping it constantly circulating. So the power cord is like 10 feet long. I don't know how long this thing is. I didn't measure it. It's crazy long. It actually reaches an outlet when you need a pump somewhere that's not in your aquarium. And there are different attachments on the front. So this one here has this little guy that is just a front intake, but there's another one in here that I've not used, which I could have used last night actually. So you put this one on there. I guess you just snap it on if I remember correctly. I remember when I was trying to take it off, I was like, how do you get this thing off of here? All right, I'm not going to break it. But it has a way to slow down the flow going in, which I thought was kind of cool. So you could actually limit the amount of water movement in your bucket. But I just used the one that I used for the vacuum attachment, and that one does just snap on. It just clips into place. Now, I will say one thing about this pump, and maybe it's just this one pump, but there's been a couple of times where it just didn't do anything, and I had to pull the cover off and kind of give it a little kickstart, and then it starts spinning. I don't know if that's normal, if that's just because it's the smallest pump of their system, but if you just plug it in, expect magic to happen, and it doesn't happen, it could be you need to give it a little nudge. I don't know why. But that was really convenient last night to keep all that stuff in circulation. Just want to put the stuff away. Now, the other thing, and this is what I wanted to really emphasize, is let's say you came home with a lot of frags, and you put a few in that bucket, or you put all of them in the bucket, okay? The thing is, the coral has to be in the dip a certain amount of minutes. It says right on the bottle, you know, like 5-minute dip, no longer than 10, something like that. And so set a timer, and as soon as the timer elapses, get that out of the dip and put it in another bucket, because you're not going to be able to place all these corals. It takes time to put each coral where it belongs. It takes time to turkey baste them off and brush them off and make sure they're clean. So we want to make sure that everything is really going along clockwork. And so even when Ryan was here last night with the helping of the process, as I started to put one thing in the tank, he set a timer himself. And then when the timer went off, he started moving frags out of the bucket and into the rinse bucket and started putting more frags in the bucket of dip. And that way, nothing cooked. Because if you are placing one coral after another, or you're focusing on one that's a real challenge, and the other one's just sitting there baking, you're actually hurting the coral itself. And we don't want to do that. We want the coral to be as healthy as possible and get into the reef. I'm not going to say as quickly as possible, but I think you understand what I'm trying to say. Get it out of the solution and get into some rinse water. It can be in there for a while. And then, of course, when I say a while, you know, I'm talking 20 minutes, maybe 25 minutes. If you go too long, the water in the bucket might start cooling off. Now, if you have a small heater in there, that's fine. And if you have a little circulation pump, that's even better. But if you can't do that, throw out the water, grab another bucket of water out of your reef to use as rinse to keep the temperature up so it doesn't cool down too much while you're working. Once you've got the corals dipped and rinsed and you've inspected them and you say, I'm ready to put them in my tank, you may still need to do one more thing. So you've got your coral, I'm going to focus on specific corals today. So let's talk about acropora, because that's what we used last night. Now, acropora can be cut with a saw, they can be snapped off, they can be cut with bone cutters, they can break accidentally, and just depending on how it was snapped, it may not be the perfect surface to bond to your rockwork. So what you could do is grab a small piece of sandpaper and put it over a little wooden block. This is actually on a piece of acrylic because, you know, me and acrylic. And so I have this perfectly smooth surface, and then you could take your frag and you can just gently drag it across, because that skeleton is super, it's just not that dense. I don't want to say it's soft, because that's the wrong term, but it doesn't take much to sand. And you can use 100 grit, you can use 200 grit, whatever you like. You just want to kind of do that so the bottom is smooth, so that way you can put it on the spot you want it. Because if it's cut at a weird bevel and you try and set it on there, either the frag has to sit at an angle on the frag plug instead of standing up, or you're trying to glue it and it's just kind of falling over because it's, you know, it's like got a notch. So we want to make sure, so you just sand the low bottom for a few strokes. This works great for like Montipora, whether it's Capricornus or Digitata. If you're just trying to get a nice clean edge, gently sand it a few strokes on the sanding block, and then you can put it on the frag plug, you can put it on the rockwork itself. That's pretty much the two choices you have, now that I think about it. When you're trying to put it into your tank, you may need two hands, and a lot of times we work with one hand. Like last night, I was working one-handed, and Ryan went behind me on the walkboard, and he put two hands in the tank and actually pressed the putty around the coral from both sides to really secure it, which is actually better. I usually don't like doing it because I'm wearing my watch, and so then I have to take my watch off, and like I said, there's a few spinning plates when I'm working over the tank, and I don't always want to have both hands in the water at the same time. But when I was watching him do that, I said, no, that was so much better, so much smarter. So if you can, take off your watch, or if it's waterproof, you can do that. I just, the thing also is you need to be able to see, and if the water's moving, it may be hard to see what you're doing. So like last night, I used my floater box. I also used my work tray, so we'll talk about that too. So I used the floater box. It's just a small box that you can put your cell phone in and take pictures, and you can set it on the surface of the water, and it's like wearing a dive mask on your face, and you can see what you're doing, but it may try to move because of the flow in the tank. So if you stopped all the flow in the tank, you turned off your return pump, you've turned off your circulation pumps, it should pretty much stay where you are, other than the movement from your own arms in the water, and maybe if you have some large fish that are creating a little bit of current, your box may drift a little bit, but you can put it back where you need it, and you can see what you're doing in the tank, and that's really convenient to do as you're working. Another choice you could do, it would all come down to timing and planning, but if you were in the middle of a water change and you had these new frags you wanted to plant, you could drain the tank water down, plant the corals with only a little bit of water, so you're not putting your arm through this much water, but it's just a few inches, and you can work, and then when you're done, fill up the tank with more new water. That actually would be beneficial to the reef itself as well as the new corals, because the glues and the putties we use have some, let's just call them toxins in the water, and the new salt water will help dilute that, which should be beneficial. So what we did last night is we took my work tray. I make these things, I sell them on my website, and it's one size. So if it doesn't fit your tank, because your tank's so small, forget it. But I make this one size, and you just put 1-inch PVC pipe through here, whatever the length of your tank is, so it spans the tank, and then I can actually roll it side to side, or with the rails in place on top of my tank, I can actually push the tray back, or I can move it to the front of the tank. So I can actually keep my glue, I can have my putty in there, I can have a rubber band in there, I can have a zip tie in there, I can have all my stuff on top of the tank, and I can be working. And then when I need to get to this area here, I just shove it over to here and keep working in this area and reach up and get what I need, and put my waste and my junk and whatever I'm not needing in here out of my way and not in the water. So it's really convenient, especially with you guys with rimless tanks. It's nice to have a way to put some things down. So that's what we did last night. And it was funny because Ryan says, you should sell this. And I said, I do. So the work tray is 50, 60 bucks, I think. Now, the two things we used to glue things down with was the glue grenade from Polyp Labs. I love this thing because it's called a grenade. It makes me happy. And inside it has all these little individual tubes. And I know that you can buy like dollar store glue as well, cyanoacrylate, which is the super glue gel. You can do that too. I just like this and I use it. And when you open it up, the first thing you have to do is remove this little protective collar. So let me do that one more time, because I went so fast. So here's your brand new tube out of the container. You take off the top piece. There's a little protective piece. You remove that. And then this part here, when it screws on, will puncture the tube and open it up. So I'm not going to puncture it right now, but you would do this. And then you could use the tip to squeeze it in to the area you want to glue, or you can do like me and just blob it onto wherever you're going to work and put it in your tank. So that is what we did last night. I used glue for some of the smaller frags, and I used putty for some of the bigger frags. So the putty I like to use is DD Aquascape. And this stuff here is in the coralline color. There's a purplish color there, right there on the box. And this is a 2-part putty. There's a gray part and there's a red part, and you mix the two together and you get purple. It's going to look blue because of the bag, but the stuff in here is gray. And then this one is red or pink. So I had some old ones of these and we were trying to use it and it wasn't cooperating. I threw it away. I recently bought this to sell in my shop, and I need to put it on my website too. But I really, really like this. I've been using this for probably 10 or 15 years. From the moment I discovered it, I've never went to any other brand of putty. I really like it. And then you can take the putty, you knead it. It's really smart to wear gloves to protect yourself from getting any of those chemicals into your skin for health reasons. And I'm not trying to give you a scare tactic. So I've mentioned this before, but if you're newer to the channel, you've never heard the story. There was a guy who did fragging demos for his club all the time in Boston. And one day when he was doing a presentation, he was just kneading putty like he always does. And he went into shock, and they had to call 911, and they took him out on a gurney. He actually had a reaction to that putty. It finally had been in his hand one too many times, and he was rushed to the hospital. So you may have a tolerance now, it could be wearing off. So I try to always wear gloves when I'm working with putty. Last night I couldn't find my gloves, but since I use gloves every time, I wasn't gonna sweat it, and I just went ahead and proceeded with my project. But best practices would be wear rubber gloves, and you can work with a putty. And then when you're done, your hands are still clean. They'll be wet, but they'll be clean. So that part's nice. And then you can do different things. Like one of the things I often do when I'm working with putty, I make a small blob, like about the size of a regular, no, about a big around as a grape, okay? So about grape size. And then I might break that in half and use one half for one thing, the other half for another, or start with one and add more putty next to it. And that will be, because if you make a whole bunch at one time, the putty will harden while you're working and it'll be useless. So I make it in little small batches, and I work a few frags at a time with a little bit of putty, maybe just 2 frags at a time. And that's the benefit of the coral sitting in the bucket of rinse water. They're not going to be suffering or sitting, not suffering. They're not going to be just sitting in the air drying out. They're not going to be sitting in the coral dip getting cooked. They're literally just waiting, pending. And then last night I'd take a couple, and I put them in the work tray, and they were right there in my tray on the top of the tank, and I could reach up there and get my glue, get my putty, and I worked it around. And sometimes I'll take the putty and kind of, after it's a ball, I may put a dimple in the middle, put a drop of the glue in there, put the frag into the glue, and then take that whole thing and put it down on the rock and press down into the rock, and then pinch the putty around the frag, and the glue is holding the frag to the putty is grabbing onto the rock. And if that doesn't work, I will actually put glue on the bottom of the putty and glue and putty to kind of like fill those crevices and make sure it holds securely. But these are the techniques I use for SPS corals. If you were trying to secure a different type of coral, like an LPS, they have a big long skeleton base in many cases. You may want to use something as simple as a zip tie and just tie it around a rock to get it established where you need it to be. You can also, which I love to do, when I have multiple frags of the same LPS coral, like let's say I have, you guys saw I recently got that Frammer coral, but it was really, really big. But in the past I'd gotten like a few hammer frags, or I remember I had this pink hammer coral that grew from a couple of heads into half a volleyball. The only reason it wasn't a whole volleyball is because of the bottom, okay? But when my tank leaked and I had to take it out of the tank, you'd think I would just lift this perfect coral out and put it somewhere. It just crumbled in my hands, and it was all these pieces. And so I used a zip tie in the new system to make it a little bouquet. I tied all their little legs together, cleaned up the bottom with a saw, and set it somewhere, and I had all the heads together the way I wanted them. And the zip tie was completely safe. Keep in mind that all zip ties are not the same. There are some that are completely plastic. There are some that have a metal tine in there. Don't use the ones with metal in your tank. If you have already, please remove those and get ones that are all plastic. They're not hard to find. And if you're a person who likes to reuse zip ties, they have reusables where you can press a button to kind of release it. But I just use the regular everyday ones because I'm not going through that many zip ties. And like, for example, I was talking about cable management, and someone said, oh, you could have used reusables. I don't know that you can, because after I've cut off the excess, I'm down to just a little piece of plastic, and I don't know that I could release, remove, put it back around my wires, and use that little nub and tuck it back in one more time. That might be more hassle than the trouble it's worth. So I just buy my zip ties at Harbor Freight. They're dirt cheap, and that takes care of my needs. The other thing you can use to hold a coral in place in your tank could be a rubber band. And it just depends what kind of coral you're using. Like if we're talking about like a leather coral, or you're using like a Rickordia, in the mushroom family, even a rock anemone. I mean, these are some crazy things I'm talking about, but you could loosely put a rubber band around it just to kind of keep it tethered there until it holds on, and then after a little bit while, you can just remove it. If you go too tight, if you just like really bolt it on there, what'll happen is this could actually cut through the soft coral, and you'll have 2 corals instead of 1. So we don't want to do that. The rock anemones tend to grab on pretty quickly, so you wouldn't have to do that. But mushrooms are slimy, and so using a rubber band, some people use a toothpick and put a toothpick right through the coral into a hole in the rock to stab it there. I don't do that. The zip tie works. You can use mesh material, sort of like fishnet fabric, or the netting. We used to get well, you know what, if you buy avocados in a bag, that's that netting. You could cut out some fabric of that from that. You can cut out some squares from that fabric patch and wrap it around the creature you're trying to hold down to a rock. And then after a week or two, you can remove the netting and it should stay there permanently. Another thing people do is they may have something called a shroom box, which is for mushrooms. And it's some kind of an acrylic box, usually with a lot of little holes in the side. And they put gravel in the bottom and they put the mushrooms in there. And the mushrooms will just kind of float around and grab onto one or two. And once they are attached to any kind of substrate, you can then glue the substrate to the rock where you want that mushroom to be. So you do have that ability to secure a coral in place and not have it just blow everywhere or slime away. But you absolutely cannot glue a mushroom to the rock. It won't work. They're too slimy. Trying to think what I left out as regards to last night. I think I pretty much covered it all. See, we're done. The live stream's over. Thanks for tuning in. Those are the things we talked that were predominant on my mind for last night's efforts. And you know, those videos are really brief for a reason, and so sometimes I can't really go into a lot of detail, but I try to give you a general oversight. With our live streams, we get to delve into topics a little more deeply. Now, there are other products on the market, like the putty I was talking about, the one I like. There are other ones out there. There's something that you can buy called Aquamend. I believe that's a Home Depot product. Coral View sells one. Seachem sells a putty. Two Little Fishies sells a putty. There's a lot of different choices that you can use. And Tunzi has one that I tried once. It was okay, but it dried super fast for me. And I don't know if again, I only tried it once. I never tried it again. But I remember when I made the little ball of putty, I feel like 45 seconds later, that putty I couldn't use it anymore. It was already hardened. I was like, wow, okay. So I had to make an even smaller pea at a time, a little size of a pea, and try to secure something in place. But I just decided I'm not going to use this one anymore. So if you're a Tunzi putty user and it works great for you, feel free to tell us in the comments, because I just found it was super rapidly drying and it was too fast for me. I'd rather have some time to be able to reach into the tank, and if something kind of starts to fall over, I can put my hand back in the tank and press the coral back in place, because the putty is still pliable enough that I can press it in and get that coral where I want it. So yeah, there's a bunch of new frags behind me. Overall, the reef is doing great. I ran carbon last night, and the water through the tank is much more clear. I should have done that when I said I was going to do it, 9 days ago. I said, I'm going to do carbon tonight. I just didn't do it. And so last night, after we did all our work, after we did all that work, the one thing that can a lot of times happen for hobbyists is when you're planting these corals, especially if you're using putty, your protein skimmer may really react badly. I actually stuck my head under the tank and looked while we were working, and my skimmer didn't care at all. The foam just lowered in the body. But sometimes protein skimmers will either overflow because of the chemical of the putty, or they may just completely collapse and there's no foam at all, and you're thinking, what's wrong? And it's because you probably glued too many corals down during the same session. So if you are thinking about planting corals in your tank, I would like to urge you not to do the entire reef. Even with my tank last night with the frags I got, it wasn't an overwhelming amount. I mean, we were busy for a couple of hours, but it wasn't like we planted the whole reef. I mean, I have a whole reef. We added some new things. As a matter of fact, when we were done, Ryan, you heard him on the video last night, he goes, is that it? Didn't I bring you any more? I've spent hours, because he literally cut things off his reef, put them in bags, wrote on the bags what they were, put them in a cooler, and drove to my house. They were the freshest cut frags I've had in a long time. And we then put them right in the tank, but there's a lot of effort involved. It's one of the reasons why I don't bring corals to frag swaps, because it's so much work. And he did all that work, and then he drove it over here, and we spent the evening putting corals in the tank, and then we watched some TV together before he took off. So really nice of him to be willing to do that, and like I said, I'm super appreciative to that. I know I've got a couple other sources of corals that are coming in the pending weeks, so I'm going to have to not get too many. I want to have the right amount I want to fill in some voids, but I don't want to overdo it and to put too much in the system that will just be, and the reason being, you know, you're always like, oh, there's always room for one more frag. The problem is, as the corals grow, and when they grow well, they will start beating each other up, and you'll end up with like 6 or 7 parent colonies and nothing else. So putting in 100 awesome frags is never a good idea, because you won't end up with 100 awesome corals. You'll end up with maybe 6 or a dozen, and the rest just didn't make it for one reason or another. And it's just, that's just how it is. There's only so much room on the reef. So, you know, if you're a bonsai reefer and you trim all the time, yeah, I bet you can maintain 20, 30 corals in your tank, and it'll look really cool for a while. But there's just this tipping point. There's this part where you're like, well, I really like that one, so I'm not going to touch it anymore. And this one here, it's just not really doing much anyway, and it just kind of fades away, you know, or you let things overgrow it. So you don't want to have too much coral in your tank, and you definitely don't want to plant too many in your tank at the same time on the same day. But when you're done, the best thing you can do as soon as you've completed the task is go ahead and run carbon. And I always tell people, put carbon in a reactor. A lot of times people will like to just put carbon like in a hang-on-back filter, like that little pillow, they slide it in and water flows through it. That's good, that's better, that's at least water going through it. But to just put it in a mesh bag and lay the bag in the bottom of your sump, anywhere in your sump, just sitting there, that's called passive filtration, and it's like, I hope it'll pull things out. And it probably will, but it is the worst way of running carbon on a reef tank, in my opinion. I think you should have the carbon in a reactor where water pumps in, goes down, and goes through the carbon to get back out, and run it very slowly. It shouldn't move at all, and the water can trickle out, because as long as water's going in and water's coming out, every drop going in is getting cleaned off, and every drop coming out is more clear than before. And carbon's only good for a few days, but it's great after just doing something like we did last night. And so I knew I have a protein skimmer running. Yes, I could do a water change, but you don't have to do a water change after planting corals. But running carbon is a really smart move, because it will absorb all the stuff in the water column and help clarify the water as well. And hopefully all your corals will respond well. Now, one thing I didn't talk about at all, because I was talking about SPS corals and I was moving quickly with them because we've been living this reef for the last 2 months together every single day, is that a lot of times when I get a new coral, I don't necessarily put it on the reef yet. I put it through the dip, I rinse it off, I inspect it, and then I put it on the sand bed. And I'm bad about that. I mean, I am well known for putting frags on sand beds. And the worst part is, if I never take them off the sand bed, my sand bed gets really full of coral. And that's why I had what I called the coral graveyard in the back of my tank, where none of them were dead. They were completely alive and all interacting with each other, and it was impossible to clean the sand back there at all. And so that's why when Dwayne was here and we were doing the reef reset, I was in the back of the tank and I'm just pulling out coral after coral after coral, and he was working on something on the front, and he's like, wow, because he could see all the sand. He was like, you've been busy. I was like, yeah, I'm not just standing around here, I'm doing something too. And I removed all of that to expose all that sand, and then we were able to gravel vac that ancient sand bed that I hadn't seen in years to get a lot of detritus out of it. So that was because I left corals on the sand. And you know what? 2 of those huge coral colonies that were down there were from Ryan. And I remember when I got them years ago, I brought them home. I went to his house. He gave me these frags. I came home and it was winter and it was really cold. And it was really cold in my car, you know, until the car warmed up. And when I got home, the bags were cold. I'm like, holy crap, I need to get these things into the sump quickly, which I did. I got the temperature up, and then I dipped them in one of my coral dips, one that is a little more harsh. And I thought I used the right amount. I know I didn't leave them in too long. And I put each one on this really neat kind of it was a different kind of frag plug. You know, normally a frag plug's a little ceramic thing and you put a dot of glue and you put it. This was some kind of 3D printed thing where you would put the coral in the middle and then you put the base on and twist it, and the thing would grab the frag like a twist lock collar. It was really neat. And so I put his 3 frags on those twist lock things and stuck them in the sand so they wouldn't fall over. And the next day when I checked on them, they were all 3 bone white. I mean, completely white. There was no life at all. I was like, what? I killed them? And I thought, well, it was really cold last night. It was cold on the drive home because I didn't go there to bring home corals. I didn't come prepared. And I thought, man, that's crazy. And I was like, all right, well, you know, it's my fault. And then like a couple days later, I was looking at them down there on the bottom, these white skeletons. I like to call them Arctic corals because they remind me of that. And I'm looking at them, and I was like, hang on. And I looked really closely, and all three had polyps. They just were completely white. There was no color in them whatsoever. So clearly, when I dipped, however I did it, I did something wrong, and it just sucked the coral, the color right out of the corals. It was crazy. It was the craziest thing I've ever done. So I left them alone. And of the three, two lived. The third one kind of lived, and then something happened, and it just got, something happened to it. It just didn't make it. But the other two grew into colonies about this big, you know, nice pieces. And one of them is right there. That's a colony that's about, I don't know, the size of almost the size of an avocado. And then the other one was right here. And that's one of the ones I lost with the recent problem in the reef tank that happened a month ago. And that one just went up in smoke, and I couldn't save it. So, where was I going with this? Oh, so putting corals on your sand bed is okay, but you should then later move them up. Now, why would you put them on the sand bed at all? You're thinking, you know, look, it came out of a reef tank, it's under all this lighting, and then you're going to put it way down on the sand where you have the least par. What are you thinking? What I'm thinking is, I just brought home a coral, which I did that night. I just put it in chemicals. It just got snipped. I put it in chemicals. It's going through a lot. And then I want to stop handling it as fast as possible. So if I can just put it down in the sand and leave it alone for like a week or two, just to calm down and relax and get used to my system, that's going to be better for the coral itself. And then I can move it up into place and plant it. My problem was I didn't move it up and plant it. I left it down there, and it just grew into a colony exactly where it was. It had enough light. So let's just say I got lucky. But if you are coming home with frags and you don't have the ability to plant them on the rockwork immediately, that is okay. You can definitely put them down on the sand initially, put them in an area where they're still getting some flow. Usually across the front is good. I know some of you like to have frag racks in your tanks. I hate that, but okay. If you have a frag rack, you have a place to put them, and you can move the frag rack up and down to get as much light or as little light as you want. But at least your hands are off the coral temporarily to let it get used to your system, and then when you're ready, you can go ahead and place it where you want in your reef. Now, sometimes the frag plugs themselves that the frag is on are too big on the base. You know, the post underneath is too big, just doesn't fit anything in your rock work, or the one spot where you really want it, there's no crevice. It's more like there's this round edge of the rock. You know, it's like, here's the rounded edge, and you want to stick a frag off of it sticking out, right? But you have this big frag plug, and then you got the disc, and then you got the frag. You can take wire cutters, and you can snip off that post. So now you have a disc with the frag, and you can put the glue on the bottom side of the disc, or putty, or glue, putty, glue, and press on the rock and press the putty, and it will stay at that angle. Another thing some hobbyists do is they will literally take the frag off the frag plug and throw away the frag plug. And the reason they do that is because they don't want the frag plug to possibly introduce algae in their tank or potentially pests. So if there was something on the frag plug and not on the frag itself, by eliminating the entire plug and just having the frag itself, they can put that in their tank exactly where they want it with minimal putty, minimal glue. So you do have that option. It's you know, it's your tank. You can do what you like. I have seen some beautiful reef tanks, and I've seen some stuff that I think is just a little unnatural looking is the nicest way to say it, where, for example, you'll see someone has some kind of a huge round circle, and there's a frag in the middle of it. But there's this huge disc. I mean, it's just this big disc. It's like, it feels like there's this frisbee in your in your tank, and they have these circles on the bottom of their tank because they don't want sand. Because sand is horrible, right? So they want to have circles on the bottom because that looks good. And then they say, well, eventually the coral will grow and cover all of that. Doesn't really need all of that surface. It can literally grow and make skeleton of its own and create its own skin. I have a huge chalice over here. There's nothing underneath. It is literally the chalice's skeleton. I've got a chalice right here. It's got whatever skeleton it formed. This one here encrusted over a flat piece of shelf rock, and that's fine. It worked out fine, and you can do that as well. But to have big things that are man-made in your reef usually doesn't look good, and it's not something you would strive for. It's not something that you would say, hey, I want to do that too, because it's just kind of, we want our reefs to look natural. We want to kind of look in our tank and kind of imagine we're in the ocean, and this is what it looks like. It'll never look like the ocean because there's a number of reasons why, but it's nice to try to recreate nature as much as we possibly can with the things that we have access to as we, mix the different species together in one body of water. Okay. I think that's everything about this topic today. So what I'd like to do is hopefully you guys have some questions about fragging and placing corals that I can answer for the next 10 or 15 minutes. And then we'll just do an open Q&A for whatever topic you like. Because I always find that people tune in for these live streams for the information they want, and then we get into the Q&A and maybe 20 minutes into the questions like, oh yeah, something about the original topic, and I feel like those people are long gone and they'll never benefit from that extra nugget of information. So I'd like to encourage you to ask those questions about fragging if you can right now, so we can stay on topic for a little bit longer before we delve into the open topics of whatever's in your head. So hello everyone, I see all your highs on here at the beginning of the stream, I appreciate that. Make sure that you are putting @Mila's Reef. That helps a lot with the chat. The chat's been very minimal today, which is nice. I guess you're really listening, or you're busy working your tanks and have me on in the background for noise. And I'm fine with that. I got a new pump this week, new to me. Actually, I have a whole bunch of pumps, but I saw this in an ad on Facebook, or one of my Facebook friends shared it, and I was like, oh, that thing looks awesome. And the reason I liked what I was seeing is I had this imagination that the bottom is so specifically designed that you could lower this thing into your tank and pump water out for a water change and not have to worry about fish getting sucked against the base. And I was right. Now I'll tell you, everyone that shows this pump never shows you the bottom. It's never shown to you. So we're going to look at it together on this live stream. This pump moves about 800 gallons an hour, and it retails $100. And it's made by Sicce. And it's very plain Jane looking, and it's designed to be a utility pump. It's designed to do things. It's not supposed to be like your return pump. So right here, this is threaded for 3/4. Let me put this a little closer to the camera. For 3/4 inch thread, like a garden hose connection, or some kind of a fitting that you like. And then the water sucks in through these tiny little holes in the bottom. So you got holes right here, and then right there as well. The impeller's right here. And when you twist this off, do I want to do this on camera? All right, let's see if I can do it on camera. When you twist that off, you can then remove the base, and there is the inside of the pump. Now, I was told by Steve Berlin himself, who is some muckety-muck at Sicce. He's important, okay, up in Canada. And he said that there are people in the freshwater community that will shove this down into their pond in 2 feet of silt, and water comes pumping out the top. And I'm just like, that's insane. And I was like, I got to see what's on the bottom. How could they possibly make that work, So my desire to get this pump specifically was, I thought how great it would be if I wanted to pump water out of my tank, because I use currently I think it's a Mag 9.5. It's this huge beastly pump. It's a 9.5 or a 12, and it's got a huge hole in the side where it sucks water in. And when I put the pump in my tank to pump water out and down the driveway, there's a hole in the front that I'm afraid a fish will get sucked into. And a lot of times my fish are inquisitive, they want to see what I'm doing, and they'll swim toward it, and I get really nervous. And I'm like moving the pump over, and I'm thinking, oh God, this will be the day. And I have a big strainer basket, but now the pump's like this big. It's just this huge thing you lower in the tank, and it's like, ugh. So I was thinking this could be an awesome alternative where I can just lower it down in the tank. I can actually hang it at a certain height with a little bit of creativity. And when it reaches the bottom, it just runs out of water. So it won't pump out too much water out of my tank accidentally. And the nice thing about this pump is, like, if you're trying to pump water out of your barrel, like let's say you're doing water change and you had a barrel of salt water in front of your tank, this thing will sit in the bottom of the barrel and it will slurp up almost every drop. According to them, it can slurp water down to 1/10 of an inch. So when there's this much water left in the bottom of your barrel, it it removed everything instead of just doing a portion of it. Jack's barking right now. Okay, I'm back. So I'm looking forward to trying out that pump. I would like the idea of also sucking out all the waste in the bottom of my big, huge poly tank that's behind the Reef tank there, where I can lower it down, and just by holding onto the hose, I can lift it and move it over and kind of get all the sediment that has amassed at the base of the container. So we'll see how it works out. But I have high hopes. The cord looks like a standard length. Let's see if it says on here. Anyway, I think a lot of people have had this for a long time. I only found out about maybe a month and a half ago or 2 months ago. And so when Siche contacted me and said, you know, well, actually I contacted them. I said, look, I want to sell some pumps for my website. What do you got? You know, what are your best sellers? And I said, by the way, I totally want this utility pump. And they said, oh, absolutely, you definitely want that one. So I had them send me some goodies. I'm trying things out for myself before they go on the website. But this one here, I've been super excited about. It's such a funny thing to be excited about. But I was like, yes, I need that in my life. And so I got it. And there will be some kind of a brief video about that in the near future, or some kind of discussion. We'll see. But that is coming up. I also got a new pump to try out on my frag tank. Actually, a few. Because like I said, I want to sell some Siche pumps for my system. But I'm not familiar with them. I don't have any hands-on experience. So I asked them to send me some of their popular ones, and I got the Extreme SDC, which is a propeller pump. And it holds on apparently magnetically to the glass, which I like. So you can place it wherever you like in your tank, and you can control it with Wi-Fi. So you can use an app on your phone to talk to this pump to control the flow in the tank, and I can put that on the frag tank. And I also got a very large return pump. This is a multi-function pump, the Syncra 5.0, I believe. And this is a huge return pump that I believe can be used internally or externally. And it also allows you to use an app to control it. So I'll be trying this out on the frag tank. I'll take my Vectra offline and hook this up and see how it runs in there. So this, I haven't even opened the box yet. You guys know me, I'm so patient. I don't rush into anything. Okay, let's see if we can find some questions here. Oh, Poor Man's Reef said, I had to re-glue some corals today. Last night, deep cleaning knocked some of them loose. That is something that does happen with our corals, and it is another part of mounting corals that we should discuss. You know, sometimes you bump them. And sometimes it's like the smallest little thing, you know, you barely touched it and the thing goes dunk. And other times you bump into it and you're like, oh no, and it's totally fine and it held perfectly. So if it does bump loose, it's always best to get back in there and fix it as soon as you can before you forget about it. And again, the principle is the same. You would just flip it over, put some glue on the base, and put it on the rock where you like it to be. You may need to hold it there for about a solid minute. You may need to like pull it and push it back on, so it kind of makes the glue kind of webby. So it's like Spider-Man's web, and you're kind of webify and kind of mushing it around and so forth, and it kind of encourages it to like grab onto itself and interlock, and then the coral should stay in place. Dwayne is really good at planting the craziest angles. I've watched him do it, and it's like black magic. He will just take this frag, and it's like there's no way, and it's big, and there's no way it's going to stand at this weird 45-degree angle. And he just does this thing, rubs some glue on the rock, and then he puts some glue on the coral, and he rubs it around, and he pulls and pushes and pulls and pushes, and he lets go, and the thing's just like drink, just standing there, and it's not falling. And you're like, I could try that for 2 hours and not do that, and he does it on a regular basis. It's pretty great. I see someone's trying out their members' icons. the emoticons that we have available here. Speaking of members only, so on this channel, there's an option to join and become a member. And if you're on Apple devices, you can't see the join button. But if you're on an Android device, you can. So it's just going to be youtube.com/MilosReef/join. And if you go there and join, you get to be part of the group that is a monthly subscriber. And there's a couple of tiers you can pick from. One of the things that I did this year when I turned it on is I let members watch us doing the reef reset in real time. And then last weekend I uploaded a long video of the project going on in the backyard that is going to be the future of Milos Reef. And I did that for them to see, and a small handful of people got to see it. I will release like an abbreviated version of that here on the channel for everyone to see. But if you become a member, you get to see more detail. And plus you're supporting this channel, you're supporting me. And so that's why it exists. I had a lot of people say to me, would you please turn on the join button? And I was like, okay. So I did. And it's been in place for a couple of months. So if you weren't even aware of it, there you go. There's something happening on Monday that's big, and that will be going to members only. So if you want to join, it's youtube.com/MilosReef/join to join, and then you'll get access to what's happening on Monday. And also, I'm speaking to the Atlanta Reef Club tomorrow, online, virtually. So if you are a member of the Atlanta Reef Club and you're watching this channel and not keeping up with your local club news, don't miss my talk. It'll actually be about the Reef Reset. That's actually a video I have not shared yet. And so this will be the first time I'm presenting on that topic specifically. And it will include some pictures and some footage from what we did back in June with the reef tank. And like I said, if you're a member, don't miss it. This is your chance. Hey, thanks for complimenting me on my shirt. I only wear this shirt when I travel. So if I'm ever in an airport and you see a Goonie shirt, there's a good chance it's me. Reef with Me says, I forgot my skimmer. I left it off for about 2 days. Are there any precautions that I should take or anything I should keep an eye out for? Nope, just turn it back on. And then, make sure it's not overflowing. AM asks, I have a mature, healthy 32-gallon BioCube with scratched glass that I plan to remove everything into a new water box, 20-gallon cube. Any tips? Should I get new sand? Thanks. If the sand bed is over 6 months old, you need to take it out and wash it or replace it with brand new sand, if you prefer that. You could buy yourself 1 or 2 bags of live sand. That would be beneficial for your new tank. And then you can move your livestock into your new tank as well. But is there anything to worry about? No. It's just a matter of systematically moving everything where it needs to go. I'm getting phone calls. Sometimes I worry my microphone doesn't work. But other than that, yeah, you'll just move things over. Okay, so the corals you're going to move, let's pretend some are LPS and SPS because I don't know what's in your tank. While they're in your hand, while they're out of the tank, that is the perfect time to cut off all the dead skeleton on the bottom half to just keep the living part and put that on your rock work. So when you take things out of your 32-gallon tank and you put them in your 20-gallon tank, they will fit and there will still be room for growth. If you take the entire thing with all the bad on the bottom and just move it over, you've moved the bad with it. And by bad, I mean dead. Maybe there's aptasia in it, maybe there's bubble algae in it, whatever. It's wasted space. You don't want to sacrifice any space in your 20-gallon. So by trimming off the extra, when I got the Frammer coral, it had these big, long, dead branches, and then the heads were at the top. And I was like, well, I'm not putting this much dead in my reef. It's pointless. It's going to make everything just lie down on its side. So I trimmed off all the dead, and then I could put the corals where I wanted on the base of my rock work, and it's really pretty. And they look great, and it didn't affect the coral at all. They don't care. They have no idea what I did to the foot. Will says, I'm going to be getting all my corals for my reef tank from Battle Corals. They have the option for corals being grown under T5s, metal halides and T5s, And I have a hybrid T5 LED with a par reading of 450 at the top. Yeah, that's kind of neat. So you can actually choose corals that were at least photographed under those lights and obviously grown. And that way you should get the same results, the same looks you're hoping for. Kind of neat. He continues and says that the par is 220 down at the bottom with only the T5s on. So the question is, when I buy, should I get the coral grown under T5s and acclimate, then slowly turn on the Kessel? You know what? I think you may be overthinking this a little bit. It's going to be very hard for you to do exactly what they did. And if they have theirs under T5s and metal halides, like you said, yep. Their metal halides are going to be 9 to 12 inches off the water. Their T5s are probably going to be 7 inches to 10 inches off the water. Or maybe they have them crazy up high because it's a place that sells a lot of coral and they just need to be able to see what they're doing and not have lights in their way. And then you've got your tank with your perfect light at the perfect height. You've got it dialed into the perfect intensity. Usually your best bet is just put your corals down low, and then after a couple of weeks, move it up. And then after another couple of weeks, put it in its final location. But you don't have to like not run your LED lights or only run some of your T5s or something like that. It's just, think of it more like, well, how long are the lights on per day? If your tank is barren, if you have nothing in it and you're just getting corals from them directly, and as soon as they arrive, they're going in the tank, your best bet might be to just have a shorter light period and put everything where you want it to be and just enjoy your tank. And then you can increase the length the lights are on a weekly basis by adding an extra 15 minutes or 30 minutes to the timer. So if you're starting this brand new tank and you've cycled it and everything's great, and now you're ready to rock and roll with some corals, and you're calling Battle Corals saying, send me my stuff, then at that point you may have the option to set your lights to maybe 5 hours a day. And just 5 hours, like maybe from 3 o'clock to 8 o'clock, 3 in the afternoon to 8 o'clock. And then in a week, you make it 3 to 8:30. And then in another week, you go 3 to 9 o'clock. And then another week, you go 2:30 to 9 o'clock, and you kind of expand it. And the corals will do really well. They don't need 12 to 15 hours of light per day. They don't need ramp ups and ramp downs. That's not a thing that they're thinking about. They really are about the intensity for a certain duration, which I like to call high noon. Everything else we do is really for us. So if you have your lights coming on earlier in the day and it's blue for a few hours, and then finally the Kessel turns on and starts punching the white light into the tank to really make the corals grow, and then it turns off again and you have more blue to enjoy the evening, that's, I get it. I understand that desire, that it's nice to look in your tank and see things glow, but we don't want to go so long that we exhaust the corals. I hope I answered that in a way that made sense to you. Lee says, when you're getting multiple frags at a swap, do you mix them all in the same water, the same solution? I try not to. Sometimes you end up doing that. But see, one of the things you can do while you're working with all these different corals, like yesterday, we had all SPS and one zoanthid frag. So we just put all the SPS through it and through the zoanthid frag and probably last. And it was no big deal. But if I was going from SPS to LPS to softies, like let's say I got a leather and a sinularia and some zoanthids and a mushroom or some recordias, you can dump out the bucket of dip and make a fresh bucket of dip, so you don't have the old slime of the corals that were in 10 minutes ago that are now in with the dip for the new corals going in. So you can do it in batches, and you can dump out the batch and grab a new gallon of water out of your tank, add the solution to it, mix it up, and put the corals in that. And that way you're not just putting everything through the same chemical soup. Yagi says, are you worried about having coral? Are you worried about coral warfare having a leather with an acropora in a 200-gallon? No. I've had leather corals with SPS Reef in the past. There's one in the back of my reef right now. It's a big toadstool. And they don't have a problem being in the same system, but I find that the bigger the leather gets, the more you need to run carbon on your tank. So like I always recommend you run carbon for 3 days a month. And then if you had, this, like my leather right now is probably about that big around, I guess. And the tank's 450 gallons. But if that leather was this big, I'd be running carbon every single week for 3 days to remove the stuff coming out off these corals as they're shedding, so it doesn't just affect the rest of the reef. Brian says, I'm trying to figure this out. When you put Euphilia on the bottom of the rock, how close can you put it to the rock? Will it mess up its tentacles if I scratch? No, 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 no. The coral will be completely fine. It doesn't hurt itself against your rock work. I can see what you're thinking. What could happen is if you have too much flow, it's taking their polyps and just kind of lashing it into the rocks, and the rocks then could be tearing some polyps. Or you could have fish pulling polyps off because of, you know, being semi-aggressive. These things happen sometimes. But other than that, no, you can put your coral in the tank and not worry too much about that. Problem Prone says, I know you run skies on the main reef tank, but what's your preference for radions, the blue or the pro? I like the pro. I don't know why people are buying the blue. I know exactly why they're buying the blue, but I don't know why they're buying the blue. I really like the pro because you have all the color spectrums to pick from, where with the blue, you're in the blue zone with a hint of white. And I guess see, for me, I mean, look at the tank behind me right now. It's kind of dim because I haven't adjusted it. I need to actually increase the intensity. But I picked this color for the live stream to look right on camera. But I actually like part of the day my tank to look like the sun is shining in there, where it's like daylight. And then I like the blue in the evening so it glows. I do. I like the last 30 minutes of the last hour. It's crazy. It's awesome. And it's very disco-like, right? It's just so vivid. And I do enjoy that. But I don't want to have vivid all day long. And the reason I don't is because corals don't grow as quickly under vivid light. You know, when you have crazy blue, you'll get lots of fantastic color, but the growth is slower. You slam these corals with some nice daylight, some 6,500 Kelvin, some 10,000 Kelvin, which is way down the spectrum, right, from the blues. Your coral growth will be quicker with the white light. So if I wanted to have a tank with crazy blue and the Pro could not do it, which I know it can, but let's say it couldn't, I could see myself doing something where I have several radions that are the Pro, and then I have like one blue that could be like my nighttime just blast the tank. Or you just add the XHO strips to really put that blue punch into your tank, because the Reef Bright XHOs are fantastic in that regard. But yeah, I really like the Pro. I just feel like you have more flexibility. And I know when I talk with the guys at Ecotech, you know, they seem to understand exactly what I mean. They're like, oh yeah, we get it. But they do sell a ton of the blue lights because people think blue is the way to go. Oh, great. Sean says that that pump I showed you guys, the one for water change, he says he loves it. See, that's what I think I'm going to do. I think I'm going to love it too. As soon as I saw it, I was like, I love that already, and I haven't even used it yet. Sometimes you see a product in this hobby, it's not very often, where you'll see something and you'll know immediately that it is the perfect thing, and you can basically do an instant review. I mean, you can like take it out of the box and like, yes, this is fantastic, tell the world. And then some products you need to use them for a little while and then make a decision how you feel about it. Acupuncture says, I have the the Ultra Zero pump. The Python hoses will attach to it, and it's usually on sale around the holidays. Nice. I actually watched a BRS video about it last night because I wanted to see how they used it with the Python. And I was very curious about the Python because I've heard people talk about the Python my entire time in the hobby, and I've never owned one. I've never wanted to hook up a hose to my sink to start the flow of water. And so I was kind of curious. How does that work? And I thought, oh, okay, so they start the water to get the siphon going. And then I assumed they turned off the water. But from what I saw in the video, and if you guys are Python users, you have to leave the water flowing in the sink the entire time to keep it moving to create that Venturi effect. Is that true? Because if that's the case, if it's just dumping water down the drain the entire time you're doing your water change with the Python, that's worse than your wastewater in the RODI system, in my opinion. Sean says, do you have any suggestions on keeping the peace when adding a new fish to an established reef tank? I actually do. I recommend the Peacemaker, which is an acrylic box that you hang in your tank. I've got about 4 or 5 I need to build this next week for some waiting customers. The box is made of 1/4-inch acrylic. It's got a bunch of holes drilled in it, and you hang it in your tank, and you put your brand new fish in it, and then you put a lid on top. It comes with a lid, and that way, the entire time that the new fish is with the other fish that are in the system, they see each other, but they can't fight. And then after 3 days, you can then pour it into the tank, and there's just no fighting. It's great. I've done this with every new fish that went into my tank. I've had no squabbling whatsoever, which I think is great. And I think it's because when you get that brand new fish and you bring it home, it's super stressed. And then you put it through a medicated bath, or you put it in a quarantine tank, and it's calming down, right? And then when it's time to move it out of the quarantine tank and into your tank, you're chasing it with a net to put it in your tank. And it's stressed out again. And when it goes into the tank, it's like, what just happened? Oh my God, and it's freaking out. And it releases a stress hormone in the water that tells all the other fish, attack. It's the weirdest thing. I didn't really understand this for a long time, but it makes total sense, right? So by having the brand new fish in the Peacemaker box hanging in the tank, it's all the same water, so the fish is getting used to your water. They can see each other, but they can't fight. So even if that fish is kind of stressed and releasing that hormone, the other fish are being told, attack, 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 but they have nothing to attack. And so they just kind of swim around confused. And then after 3 days, that fish is completely calm, and you can just pour it into the reef, and everyone seems to get along. And then that new fish has to figure out where it's going to sleep at night, because everyone has their perfect hiding hole. And now a new guy has to come in and find a bunk. Christine says, Silent Mike PTSD. Yeah, I know. I keep checking. I keep looking. Is this dead yet? Did the battery die? I did watch a couple of live streamers, and they wear an earpiece. It's some kind of a way to monitor themselves, or at least monitor what's going out of the computer, I guess, somehow. And I'm halfway tempted to just get one finally, just stick it on my ear so I know what's happening. I don't know. Do I want to hear myself talk? It sounds like a terrible idea. Dustin says, thanks for getting that heater bracket out quickly. I'm going to be getting in touch with you about an adjustable shelf for my skimmer. You will not. You can talk to me about a skimmer stand. I don't make adjustables. I make the right size so it's solid and trustworthy and it can never collapse. So just get with me. I'll make you exactly what you need, and it'll be good forever. I mean, no one ever complains about my skimmer stands. I did have one crazy story about a skimmer stand one year, long time ago. I had one that I built for a customer. It was during the heat of the summer, and I built it. It was done. The next day I was looking at it, I was like, it looks good. And I dropped it in a box and I shipped it to them. And I mean, I packed it really well. And when they got it, they said, there's something wrong with our stand. We tried to fix it, but we can't. I'm like, what is there to fix? It's a fixed object, you know? So they sent me a picture, and here's the top of the stand and here's the leg. And the other leg was like this. Like the glue, because it was freshly made, had just the heat of sitting in a box, just, I guess it was on its side, so it just lay down, and then it dried that way, basically, in transit. And so ever since that happened, that one time with that one customer, I keep things here longer to make sure they're fully cured before they get packed and shipped, to avoid that happening to anyone else ever again. Of course, I made them a new stand and shipped it to them, but that was a learning curve that I just didn't see. I mean, it didn't smell, it looked done. But it was, I built it the night before. So I always try to have things sit here at least 2 days before they go in a box. Sometimes much longer. Tone of the Sea says, when you're talking about washing the sand, just tap water or RDI? I'm literally talking about going outside with a garden hose and washing the sand in a bucket or in a big trough. One person told me a long time ago to try putting it in a pillowcase. I've never tried that one. I don't know how well that works. But I've always done the bucket thing where you just have a 5-gallon bucket, you fill it with about this much sand. Got to give you both my hands. So you got your 5-gallon bucket, right? About this tall, I guess. And you can put about this much sand, or this much, and you take the garden hose full blast, and you just swirl your arm around, and all the detritus floats out, and you pour the bucket out, but the sand stays in. And you just keep swirling and sloshing and dumping, and you just over and over and over until the water's nice and clean, and then that sand is ready to go in your aquarium, and then you do the next batch of sand, and you just do this until all your sand is washed. And when you're done, with that first bucket. Like I said, you pour out the water, the sand will be damp, but it won't be wet. You're not going to be putting water in your tank, you're putting damp sand, and damp sand with tap water will not hurt your reef at all. There's just nothing to it. It's negligible. So you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to rinse it in RODI or anything like that. Lincoln says, I just used phosphate RX, and after a couple of days there were white flakes all over my tank. Should I actively be trying to remove them from the tank, or will it be skimmed out? The only way it can be skimmed out is if it's in the water column. So what you could do is take a small power head and just work your way around the reef to blow off all the rock work and the substrate, just, not the sand, but just blow the rock work and the corals, and the stuff will be in the water column, and your protein skimmer should remove it. And if you... That's pretty much it. That's really the way it's going to be. You're just going to have to kick it up. And I've never had that problem in my tank. What size tank did you do it in? And what kind of skimmer? Tell me all the details. Or send me a picture or something to my email. Reef with me says, what do you think about the yogurt post in the Reef Keepers group? Oh my God. I watched it. I couldn't believe my eyes. And the guy said, yeah, I used this and I got rid of my cyanobacteria. And of course, everyone said, well, which yogurt did you use? Like it's an official, this is the cure thing. I'm like, oh my God. Guys, we have ChemiClean. We have Red Cyan RX. These products are proven. They've worked for 20 years. They work every time you use them. To put in a random dollop of yogurt into your tank? What? Okay, so I am looking forward to Rich and Ben talking about on Reef Beef. I'm sure they will, because that is just crazy to me. But you know what? I have been seeing hobbyists do nutty stuff for the last 10 years. Another one was a guy that was putting honey in his tank. And he had a picture of a big thing of honey with a big ladle, but that was just a photograph. And people are like, oh my God, you put honey? He goes, yes, I'm sugar dosing with amino acids. And I'm just like, no, you're not. And I mean, but then he reposted the honey thing. And he says, guys, do your research. So I said, all right, just for fun, I'll do my research. So I typed dosing honey in a reef tank in Google. And I found a thread from 2013 where a guy was putting honey in his aquarium. And then other threads in other forums were talking about that guy who was putting honey in his tank. And if that's your research, that's not enough. Now, if you found an article by Randall Holmes Farley that goes into all the good and bad about dosing honey into a reef tank, and this thing goes on for like 19 paragraphs, and it goes into a whole thing with statistical data and graphs and all the good stuff, all right, I could see it a little bit more logically. But I mean, I remember, God, 18 years ago when people started dosing vitamin C to help their zoanthids. I'm like, what? And then, I joke because I feed some banana to Spock occasionally. And people are like, oh my God, he puts bananas in his reef tank. There's certain things we can do. There's certain things I think we're just a little bit over the top. And putting in yogurt, I don't know. Now, there's another guy out there, again from 2013, putting milk in his tank, says that will take care of the calcium demands. No. If honey and milk was working in 2013, we'd be doing it today. Okay? I don't know if anyone tried to do yogurt in 2013. But that thread got a lot of activity. That was crazy. Louise says, are you going to be at Aquashella this year? I'm going to the one here in Dallas. I'm nervous, but I'm going. Just COVID nervous. That's just how it is. Let's see. Plaid Joker says they love my videos. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I'm glad you do. I knew someone was watching them. Yay! Havo says, last week I got a new 10-inch blonde Nassau named Mick Jagger that wasn't eating. Now he's eating everything and is looking great. That's fantastic. Man, what is the deal with my phone today? And it's the same number, I think, calling me over and over and over. Do they not know I'm doing a live stream right now? This one I don't know the answer to. Does anyone know the answer to this one for me? Trent asked, do you have any thoughts on the red Lonkus starfish? I don't recognize that name. Plasma says, I see you added a Coral Beauty to your tank. Actually, I had the Coral Beauty for a long time in my frag system, years. And when I did the reset with Dwayne in June, like June 26th, we completely emptied the frag tank of everything and started it fresh because it was such a nightmare. And I caught the Coral Beauty and I put it in the Reef. So it's been in there since June, so July, August. Yeah, it's been in there a couple of months. Tracy says, if we have to listen to you, you have to listen to you. Yeah, you're probably right. I guess I'm a little concerned because I do kind of wander away from the camera a little bit, and another wire tethered to me, I don't know how that's going to play out, but I'm sure they have super long cords. Let's see. Tone of the Sea, this I don't know the answer to. I mean, he said a few weeks back I changed from the Brute 32 gallon to a couple of regular blue plastic barrels. Oh, the blue plastic, like the kind that, like the ones I use, because they, he was saying there's a smell and he's worried about it affecting the reef. When I got my barrels, I wanted to know what was in them first. I bought them used from a farm and tractor supply on the side of the highway, and they were filled with Dr. Pepper syrup. And I was like, well, that's food grade. I mean, people are drinking Dr. Pepper and not dying. So I said, I will take, and I think I bought 3 of those barrels that day. I tried everything to get the smell out of them. They just smelled so sweet. I filled them with water to the top. I plugged the hole shut. I rolled them through the yard. I dumped it out. I put water with vinegar in there and I rolled it around. I tried to hold a power head and squirt it all different directions. I tried a garden hose and shot it everywhere. I really think the top, you know, these barrels, the ones I bought, were like a solid top with like these 2 bung holes, and I cut one large hole big enough to drop a pump in, and the other side was still sealed. And I felt like the curved top still had the syrupy on there, possibly, because I couldn't get rid of the smell. And finally, I was like, I give up. I've done everything I can. I'm just going to start using it. And I never had anything happen in my tank. And eventually, the smell did go away. Some of those barrels that you get, the entire top comes off, and then that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. There's different cleaners you can use. You can definitely use citric acid. You can use vinegar. You can use muriatic acid. You can use peroxide. These are all different cleaners, but the smell may just be what's in the plastic. But if it was used with something that's food grade, it's okay to use. If it was holding something like paint thinner, I'd be way more worried about using it. Havo says, I'm looking for one of your auto feeder chimneys. Can you ship it to Northern Ireland? I can. If you'll send me an email with your postal code, I'll look up and see what shipping is and tell you, and then you can decide if you want to proceed. Yes, Andrea, it was yogurt with probiotics. Alex says, what test kit do you use for magnesium? I use Elos. Matt says, are there any books you'd recommend? Corals by Eric Borneman. The Conscientious Marine Aquarist by Bob Fenner. The Reef Aquarium, I think it's called Volume 1, 2, and 3. That was published by Two Little Fishies and Julian Sprung. Those are several of the best ones. There are books on invertebrates. There's books on reef tanks. There's a lot of different ones out there. But those are the highlights. Those are the ones I like the best. Aaron says, if Randy wrote the article, there's no way to understand it. Well, that's why you scroll down to the bottom where it says, in conclusion. And that way you can just see what he says. And he might say, I don't recommend this. And you're like, good enough. And you can move on with your life. That's why my phone's ringing. My car warranty is about to expire. That's funny. And yes, the tank is looking so much better. So why don't I do some zooming in? Well, let me see. We're at the bottom of the chat. Let me do this. Then I'll walk away. I won't be able to see the screen for a little bit, but I'll give you guys a tour. So Trent, I'm not going to Google that and look at it myself while I'm on the live stream, so I can't help you with that one, but someone else can chime in. There are these little tiny red Phromia starfish that are nice in a reef tank, but I just don't know Luncus. I'm sorry. Sometimes I can't answer you on the spot. Alex says, what is your take on dumping your water change into a septic tank? Any chance of damaging the septic system? You know, I know some people that do it. I know some people that avoid it. They'd rather just pour it on their driveway and let it just go into the earth and not go in the septic. And I think the reason being is the salt water is not good for the bacteria in the septic system. I'm going to suggest you just do some more research and find out what you can through some forums or through some Google searches, because I would hate to give you the wrong advice. I know there's hobbyists that have septic systems, and there's people like me that are on city water. We don't have to think about it. But I'm pretty sure I've read that most that seem to have a septic don't want to put it there, and they prefer to put it on their driveway. And Plasma says, what are your experiences with fairy or flasher wrasses? I have gotten none of those. Those are they've never happened. I've just never proceeded to go that direction. All right, let me stop right here. I'm just going to highlight this spot so I can find it. Let me see. How can I highlight this? Can I highlight it? I'll put a star right there. Okay, I'm going to get behind the lens. Hopefully the air conditioner will not blow my microphone like crazy. I'm going to turn it down slightly just in case, because I won't be able to see your comments. And so now I'm going to talk a little bit lower, and I'm going to get back there and see if we can zoom in on some stuff. So hopefully you can hear me. And we're going to go here. So that's a coral. You're like, well, tell us what it is. I'm trying to remember. It was an important one too. And then here is a red millie. Look at all the hairy polyps coming out. It looks really, really good. I'm going to try to focus a little bit more. Okay. And that is the red dragon. And then this one here, Frank calls it the T-Rex. And when Ryan saw it, he goes, what's that? And I was like, yeah, I just got that a couple months ago. And it survived the big ordeal. This one back here is another millie that I got from Dwayne. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get the camera to stay still. Stay still. So that one there, it's not doing great. And it's fluorescing way too much, which is a really bad sign. And the whole bottom half has peeled away. But there's still some life, so I'm not giving up on it yet. And then down here is a rainbow stylophora that was just added. So we're going to have to give that some time to hopefully color up and look healthier. And I feel like it's far enough away from the tentacles not be damaged. We'll see how that goes. And then there's my little dendros, dendrophilia. And somewhere in this pile, my computer's in the way. Somewhere around here-ish, I can't see it, but there's a brand new Pasillipora I put in there. And I've had Pasillipora in the past. I had the pink one, and this one is green, metallic green. So I put it in there and I'll let it fill in. I think it'll be really pretty down there, and it's, it grows relatively fast. This is my branching Cephastria. And this chalice is almost completely the right color again. So it's got its green back, the lip or the edge is blue again. It's got the orange mouths. There's that coral beauty. All right, let me zoom back. Look how much better this one looks. I know it's not perfect, I get it. But it's doing so much better, and that white is almost completely gone. It's almost completely green again. And then these are the new zoanthids that we got, that we put in the tank. Ryan was not a fan of them. That was really, really funny. He is such an SPS guy that he's like, stupid zoanthids. It was really funny. This chalice is coloring up nicely. Again, it's getting its blue back. And, all right, let me zoom out so I can see what I'm looking at here. So you guys knew about this forest fire digi. I've had it since Dwayne was here. And if you look, you can see it's got new tips happening all over it. So it's doing really, really well. And then to the bottom left of it and right above it is more of that cactus pavona. And the cactus pavona is this thing right here. Big colony of it. What else do we got? This right here. Right. If I can make the camera stay still. That chunk is Homewrecker. And then this thing here, I guess it's in the staghorn family. It's called ectoplasm. So it must have been a Ghostbuster fan that did that one. And then there's a stick in the back, and it had another funny name. Something like Graveyard Party. So I'll have to review the video when Ryan explained everything. And then back here is a very nice Millie. Can I zoom in more? That's as far as I can go. But it's actually all the hairs out right now. And then this one in the front is another nice acro that's got all of its polyps out. Also right... Oh, I showed you the red Millie. That's right. And then back here is more forest fire digi down low in the back. I put some nice stuff in the back as well because I look at the reef from both sides. And then what else do we got? That's kind of it. So you can see this one here has still got a lot of work to do to heal, but it's starting to get a little bit more green every single day. So a lot of that white area you're looking at has little hints of green happening that just aren't visible in this moment. So that's kind of where we are now. Let's see if I can get this to stabilize again. All right. And of course, I'll do some close-up photography and share those in upcoming diary videos. I just want to show you what we got last night. But yeah, things are looking really good. And of course, with the blue lights, they look even better. But for a live stream, we have to use real light, like daylight, and so it's a little different looking. Sorry about the barking dog in the background. There's someone at my door. Just 1 second. All right, well, that was unexpected. So there's the a huge truck just pulled in front of my house with all the steel for my new building, and they were trying to figure out where to put it, even though they're not supposed to be here till Monday. So I'm like, I'm live streaming. I don't know why you're here. So they're gonna go figure out what to do with it, because they just want to like leave this giant trailer full of stuff in my front of my house. I was like, nope, that's not gonna work. So they're coming back on Monday. All right. Let me adjust my volume again. How does it sound now? Is that okay? Too much? Not enough? Still have power. All right. That must be why they kept calling, because they were trying to tell me they're bringing their stuff over now. No one ever told me they were coming early or going to come a couple days in advance or anything like that. That was, no, I'm not ready. He even said, what about these branches? I'm like, I know. What do you think I'm doing tomorrow? Because you're coming on Monday. So Aquapuncture said, what do you think the new light is making the cactus pavona grow differently? I don't know what's making it grow differently. It normally has a specific look that is more rounded, and this is more serrated, and I'm not sure why it's doing it. I really don't know. Maybe it's just growing so quickly because it's happy that it's just not keeping at pace, and it's kind of outpacing itself. I'm not sure what's going on. I'm just going to keep an eye on it. But I don't think the lights have anything to do with it. Brad says, how good it is to feel confident enough to zoom in and out and offer a tour. I love it. Glad to see the change in momentum. I look forward to an update with a new Worldwide Coral pieces in a few months. You know, I don't know which pieces. I know the zoanthids are from Worldwide Corals. I don't know what else was. Ryan just brought me stuff from his reef tank, and he just grabbed boxes he owned. He apparently subscribes to the box that you get from Worldwide Corals every few months or every month. And I just remember when he got those zoanthids, like, why would they send me zoanthids? It's so funny. I was like, I don't know. Freebie? I have no idea. Alex says, what's your recommended cure for non-chemical means to control or remove aptasia in anemones? Non-chemical would be a laser, but it's more for fun than it is for success. I like chemicals, and I just use them. So I would just go ahead and use F-aptasia to get rid of them. There was a question before, I think it was Alex. He said, do you think the corals will completely disappear in the wild due to climate change? I don't think they'll be completely gone. I think there will be less, and I think that others will adapt, and we're going to lose some. And it's not just climate change that does it, it's also runoff, which isn't emphasized enough. Where you've got this beautiful resort where people go to, you know, they go to stay in a hotel on some beautiful island, and then they go into the ocean to scuba dive, and they get to enjoy the corals. But all the waste leaves the island into the ocean, and that waste, that runoff, is hurting the reefs. And the pollution thing is an ongoing battle. And you know, when, I guess it was 2 years ago, there was this huge campaign to eliminate straws because they're destroying the planet, and I just was like, are you kidding me? Straws is your problem? And then, you know, people are trying to outlaw straws. It makes them feel better. And yet, there is video after video after video of monster amounts of trash that are just out in the ocean or being thrown into the ocean. Like, these bags of trash are just leaving these third world countries and just going down their rivers and into the ocean. It just drives me crazy. And we're worried about straws in California? I was like, no, it's not the straws. I am disappointed in humans that are putting trash in the oceans. I understand the trash has to go somewhere. Ever since I was a kid, I've always said, why don't we just put it in a rocket and send it to the sun where it'll be burned up? Which apparently is not an option. But I just always felt like that's the best solution. I do realize there's more and more humans on the planet, and with more and more humans, there's more and more waste, there's more and more consumption, and there are definitely things we can do to be less prolific in making waste. So recycling is great, and using things that you can wash and repeat rather than throw into a trash can, like paper plates, paper cups, plastic cups, all that kind of stuff. Saran wrap, things that we use one time and throw away. I agree, it'd be nice to eliminate a lot of that. But as long as there's countries of people just putting the trash literally in the ocean, the little bits I'm doing here in my own house or putting in my recycling cart feels like nothing, like I'm doing nothing good. I still do my part, but it's very frustrating to know there's trash being thrown off of ships into the ocean instead of being brought to harbor and went to some kind of a landfill to be crushed into the soil like they always do. I don't really have a huge more on this topic. It's very disconcerting. Let's see. Andrea, thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. I felt guilty that I was out there and just away from the microphone for those few minutes. Jose says, sulfur media is obsolete. I can't find it online or anywhere else. You know what? I'm sure someone has it. I don't know where to send you to. I don't even know where you're located, but there's got to be a place where you can get more. Like sulfur denitrator, basically, you're talking about. It's got to exist. There's got to be one brand that makes it. Maybe Brightwell sells it. I don't know. But I would just keep shopping around till you find it. How do I say this name? YS. Yes. Says, do you think reefers can preserve some of the corals that will perish in the next 100 years? Or maybe we can even stop climate change. I don't know that we can stop it. I hope that we can contribute to making it less bad. I don't want our future to be like the movie Mad Max. I don't want the future to be like Waterworld, where everyone's fighting over a handful of dirt. These are, they're supposed to be sci-fi movies, right? But I do think as hobbyists, we can kind of look at ourselves and our aquariums as Noah's Ark. And when we get corals, we really should do our best to keep them alive as much as we possibly can. I know in the past when I had something in my hand like a frog spawn, I said, I want to imagine that this is the last frog spawn on the planet and I'm in charge of keeping this one alive, and I hope to grow more so I can give it to other people so that this will continue to live. Because I don't want to be the guy that takes frog spawn from the ocean and takes more frog spawn from the ocean, takes more frog spawn from the ocean. So it's kind of a mental game in my head. But I do think that we should care very much about our corals and do everything we can to keep them healthy and happy. So this would be a perfect time to remind you today is Water Test Saturday. We do test our water. We want to make sure that everything is doing really well, that our parameters are where they belong so that our corals can thrive, because water tests save lives. And if we're not doing the water tests and things are going downhill, it's usually almost too late when things go downhill, right? I mean, think about it. When my tank was going downhill after my big water change, everyone said you should do an ICP test. And I sent it in, and a week later I found out there was something hugely missing from the water, and a few other things were missing too. And I was shocked that there was a deficiency, and the damage was already there, and the damage continued. The damage continued for a couple of weeks or 3 weeks. It was just a slow burn of loss as I was trying to replace what was lacking in the system. But I finally got everything back into the system the way it needs to be. And that was, I mean, you think about it, it was day 17 when I did the big water change, I think, in the Reef Diaries. Now we're on day 65. And since that day, since 17, I think I did 100-gallon water change on the tank in about 45, 50 days. And in that time period, the water change isn't what fixed the tank. What fixed the tank was putting all the potassium in that was missing. And all the corals have turned around because of that very important element. Now, someone said that's not a trace element. They put a comment in one of my YouTube videos that I saw today. And I don't know what it is. I mean, I really actually couldn't tell you. I took chemistry in high school a long time ago, and I wasn't paying that much attention. And to say what kind of element calcium is versus, I guess a trace, I mean, I honestly don't know. I actually want to do some homework on this one to be, to figure it out. But I guess the word alone, trace, means little bit of. And so things like iodine and iron, they're trace elements. They're small. Where potassium is a huge number. It's 400, 450, So, but on the periodic scale, I just see these things as calcium, lithium, aluminum, iron. You know, I mean, they're just elements. Whether they're trace elements or not, that kind of it doesn't really, my brain doesn't really go there. So if I've said it incorrectly, it's just lack of knowledge, but not intentional. All right, let's see. Rogue Gaming says, everything we make comes from the Earth's crust, and when we're done with it, it goes back into the Earth's crust. It's true. It really is. And Havo was really impressed with Phosphator X. That's why I've been using it for a decade. I love that stuff. You know, one thing, let me put this on the screen. Reef with Me said, adding to the trash topic, I was in Egypt in 2019, and the amount of trash in the streets was astounding. I went to snorkel in the Red Sea by the time my daughter's 20. The first half about the trash in the streets. There's also trash in the streets in New York. I mean, there's trash in the streets in Fort Worth. There's trash, you know, on our highways, and there's signs up, you know, that say, you know, don't pollute, don't throw. How about the ones where you're sitting at a red light and you watch the car in front of you roll down their window and throw their entire bag of Burger King into the street and drive away and think that's okay? I'm just, what? Are you kidding me? So something I really appreciated about Switzerland when I was growing up was that in the town of Basel, which is a city, they had these little trash cans on every single block, a metal basket mounted on the pole that had whatever sign, like don't park here, don't cross here, don't this, don't that, whatever it is. Maybe it said do this. But there was a trash can on every pole. And so you didn't walk 60 feet, and if you were opening up a package of gum in your pocket and had a wrapper, you were going to pass a little trash can to throw it in. And that's what I did. So their streets were always clean there. People put their trash in trash cans. I don't see as many trash cans as we need to have. But I wish we had more. And I do realize if we had more trash cans, someone has to empty them. I understand that. I kind of wish my own neighborhood had trash cans like at the stop signs, because when I walk Jack, I pick up her poop. And I have to carry this bag of poop, and I don't want to carry it. I hate carrying the bag of poop. It reminds me of a joke where my mom told me that if aliens ever came to the Earth, they would think that the dogs rule the planet, because all the dogs have their people walking behind them carrying their poop. And I was just like, oh my God, that's hilarious, right? And here I am, one of those guys carrying that bag of poop behind my dog who's walking in front of me. And if I could drop in one of those trash cans, that would be awesome. But like I said, someone has to empty them. But to have no trash in the streets should be a no-brainer. We should all agree that's not how it's supposed to be. And if there is some, we should bend down and pick it up. I don't know about you guys, but there are times where I will literally be walking across a parking lot, there's something in my path, I'll just pick it up and walk to the front door and put it in the trash, you know, right there, because they have a huge trash can in front of the store I'm walking into. Why not? Or a convenience store, you know, you're getting gas and there's something on the ground, just pick it up. Why leave it for others? And I realize nowadays with COVID, everything has possibly got the virus on it, and we're worried about touching anything. I mean, if someone's mask is on the ground, you don't want to touch it, right? But we really need to be better as people and just pick up and clean up as much as we can and do what we can to make the planet better. David wants to know what he missed. Nothing, man. Nothing. Let's see. Terrell said, or Terrell said, have you ever thought about trying ozone? I'm thinking about giving it a try, but I've heard some horror stories. Well, I'd love to hear the horror stories from you. I have not used it. I do know when my tank was going through its thing, that was one of the suggestions that was made to me, was start running ozone, but I didn't do anything. I've never run ozone in any of my tanks in all these years, and I'd have to do more homework myself. Nice. Yagi says that he's doing his water test right now and putting them in Reef Trace. Just got the app. I'm glad you got it. And Havo said it was hard to watch all your corals go up in smoke. Well, fortunately, it wasn't all of them. It was maybe a third of them, possibly half. I don't know. It was a lot. But the good news is there was a lot that continued to live, and all the fish lived. You know, I lost the one purple tang, and I still don't know how that died, but it did. So that's why I was saying in subsequent diaries, like, I shouldn't whine too much because I actually have a tank full of life. It's just the lower half is alive, and everything on top is missing. But now we've got a bunch of frags in there, so we're going to let everything start growing in, and these stags will grow, and then Dwayne's going to send me a package with some corals. By the way, he's going to send me a piece of Space Invader, which they're really pretty. And I've seen them, and I've never tried to get one. But the crazy thing is, he's sending me one the size of an earlobe. Yes, I said it. An earlobe. One of these things. Since when do we start measuring corals with this part of our body? That just cracks me. Dwayne, why are you measuring it against your earlobe? Oh my God, that's too funny. So I will have one of those in my tank, and it will be growing slowly in the coming months and years. By the way, gotta zoom in on this. Let's see if I can get this to focus. Okay, so I told you guys in the diaries I have red bugs, and I need to get rid of them. And I did. They're gone, and I'm happy about it. But I also use Facebook, and on Facebook it says, on this day, you know, your memories. And so I'm scrolling through my memories from a few days ago, and it goes back, you know, year after year after year. And it was 2014 when I had a picture of an SPS, and I said, hey, you know, I love how this coral looks, and look, you can even see a red bug. I have had those things in my tank since 2014 untreated, because I hadn't used that stuff in forever. I mean, easily 10 years, probably longer. I used it in the 280. I never used Interceptor in the 400. And the first 400 went up in 2011. So that means in the last 10 years, no Interceptor was used in my tank. I had those red bugs in there. You know, they just were here and there. They weren't causing chaos. The corals continued to grow. They were the right color. I didn't really see a problem. When I do a macro shot, I'd see a red bug here and there. And I just thought, how ironic. Or, I don't know. I don't know if I can get away with saying patient is the right terminology. I think lazy is better. I should have taken care of it a very long time ago, but I did finally take care of it in 2021. I'm happy about that. But to think that that family has been coexisting with me under this roof for the last 7 years is kind of ludicrous. Daryl, that's a great question. He says, I want to use ChemiClean for cyano, but I run biopellets. Won't that kill all the beneficial bacteria? Yes, it could affect them, but biopellets create cyano in your tank sometimes. So it's one of those things where you just have to kind of do it. So I would just go ahead and treat the tank and then add more bacteria to the system to replace what's been lost. And you could use Microbacter 7. That's a perfectly good one. You could... I wonder if you could set up the biopellet reactor to like run on a bucket of tank water for the 2 or 3 days you're killing the cyano. So it keeps the biopellets tumbling, and it's just processing the same 5 gallons of water basically. And then when your cyano treatment's done, you've done your water change, you can put the biopellets right back on and not affect that bacteria, because there's no reason to kill off your biopellets, right? So you might be able to do that if you could figure out a way to do that in a smart way. All you need is water to go from the bucket into the reactor, and then the reactor drain back into the bucket, right? And then after, I wouldn't put food in there or anything. It's 3 days. I think it'll be okay. But that way you're not actually having the ChemiClean product go into the biopellets and just kill the bacteria in there as well. So that would be my thought. I remember when I was running biopellets and I had cyano, like I have to treat the tank. I finally just treated the tank and stopped worrying about it. But Microbacter 7, really nice stuff. So that could be your solution. Bill says, I know you supplement magnesium. What kind do you use and how much do you add? So I use something called Magnesium Pronto. It's from Two Little Fishies. And this one jar that's 1,000 grams or 1 kilogram makes almost 5 containers of liquid magnesium. I mean, cost-wise, it's a fantastic savings. It's anhydrous magnesium chloride. I don't know if it has magnesium sulfate in it as well. It may have both. I'm not positive on that one off the top of my head. But I mix up 1 tablespoon of that powder with 12 ounces of water. So my jar that I use used to be like a pretzel jar from Costco or something. It holds 120 ounces of water. It's not a whole gallon. And I put in 10 tablespoons in that, stir it up and let it turn clear. And then I dose that with a dosing pump, and I arbitrarily stuck to the number 80 milliliters per day, and that seems to work out really well. And about once a month I have to refill that jug. And like I said, I can use 1 jar of that powder, which is like 20 bucks, to make almost 5 jars of dose, which is 5 months worth. So I find it to be great. I love it. I'm surprised more people don't use it. And it is funny because and I don't know about other magnesiums because I'm not using other ones, but with this one, as you scoop it out and put it in the water, you hear crackling like you're burning a fuse, like to fireworks, and you smell the sulfur. You can smell like you're making fireworks or loading bullets or something. It's kind of neat. Zach says, can you tell us a quick brief history about your childhood? You've mentioned growing up in Europe. Born in New York, moved to California very young, against my will. My parents just made me go. And then at one point, I went with my mother and we lived in Switzerland for several years. And then I came back to California, and then I ended up in Texas, and I've been in Texas ever since. Did anyone answer Brian Simpson's question? What would be a great power head for a Red Sea Reefer 170? I don't know. I'd say Vortec. I don't even know what size that is. I know you guys know these numbers by heart, but I always have to like go look it up and then convert it into gallons. Like, oh, it's a 55 gallon. Okay. I just don't know. But I do like Vortec pumps. And Bill says he loves ozone. He's got crystal clear water. Nice. Drum Clock says his uncle lives in Basel. Yeah, so I have had family in Oberville, which is not far from Basel. But I went to school in Basel as a kid. And I was the only kid in the classroom that spoke English. So my teacher could talk to me, but I learned German in 6 months flat. And I learned Swiss German too. And then later I learned French. And I know some Spanish. So I've got a few languages in me. Travis says, just tie the bag of poop to Jack's collar, then you don't have to carry it. You know, I was thinking, she has this harness that I then clip her leash on, her harness, you know, to get this harness with a leash. And I was thinking, I wonder if I could clip the bag to the harness and she just wear it on her back. It's almost rude, but at the same time, I don't want to carry it. I hate carrying it. Man, oh man. I know, right? An earlobe. A baby's earlobe? A Caitlin-sized earlobe? She didn't even have earlobes, okay? I mean, I don't know how he's... How are we measuring any coral from our tank to an earlobe? Does he hold it up and say, that's not big enough, throw it back in and cut a bigger one? I mean, I don't get it. Let's see. Yes says, do you think reefers with all their acquired knowledge and their enthusiasm could play a role in preserving corals, and are there any attempts or organizations yet who try to organize such an effort? That is actually an ongoing conversation. And yes, I do feel like there are some that are uniquely qualified to do this. I know all the public aquariums completely believe in this, and they're not just putting aquariums together so that we can see something pretty. They are actually doing research. They are trying to figure out how to propagate or breed different fish captively. And I know, for example, this is kind of cool. So Paula Branshaw is a friend of mine from the Dallas World Aquarium, and she wanted, this was 10 years ago, wanted to successfully breed leafy sea dragons. Now, leafy sea dragons are a protected species. I believe they're like $5,000 a head. You get the tail too. And they're only for public aquariums. Like literally, a home hobbyist should not be able to get one at all. I'm sure there's some rich guy somewhere on some island who has the island named after himself who has his own leafy sea dragon. But for the 99.9% of us on the planet, we can't have one, and we go visit them in the public aquarium. Anyway, she wanted to successfully breed these leafy sea dragons. They're really, really pretty, by the way. And they drift so slowly, and they live in sargassum, and they do this thing with their eggs that's really neat. Anyway, she's been trying to get these, I'm just going to really simplify this. She tried to get these 2 sea dragons to rub up against each other and make babies, and then those babies grow into more leafy sea dragons. That's what she wanted to do. And she tried and tried and tried. She tried all these different foods. It wasn't going well, but she got to keep trying because that's what they do at this public aquarium. They do things in the behind the scenes as well as keep the tanks pretty for the guests that come to visit and pay money. And she told me that she would even stay up late at night and watch the leafy sea dragons on a webcam to see if they're doing it. She was into this. She was all in. And then she told me one day, Mark, I had a dream that I did it, that I was successful and we had accomplished it. And I raced up to the Dallas World Aquarium to run up to that tank to see if what I was hoping worked, because if I dreamt it, it must have happened. And I don't think it did, but she thought, if I can dream it, it's going to happen. And I think at this point, they've actually done it. It's been 10 years since then. At this point, right now, she's working on something called flashlight fish. And if you know anything about those, that's a really tricky species to raise, to captively raise. And they live in total darkness. I mean, come on, you can't even watch what they're doing. And she's been working with them for the last couple of years. And she was talking a little bit about them at MACNA this year. So, I mean, they're doing things. And there are organizations that are trying to do things. There's PJAC, which is the legal side that deals with the government agencies. And they're trying to help with protecting the future of the oceans. There's Rising Tide Conservancy, I think that's correct, that is around, and they are working on something. There's a group in Australia that's working on something right now to deal with sustainable harvest of corals without affecting the reefs whatsoever. And of course, there's coral farmers all around the planet growing things out, not just like a guy like me that has some in a frag tank. I'm talking about literally they have an entire greenhouse with corals growing that can be sold to hobbyists, and not one is taken from the ocean because they're all being grown in a greenhouse environment. And that's fantastic. That's how it should be. And the more fish we can get that way, like all the fish we get from ORA, they're being captive bred there in their facilities in Florida in these buildings. The only thing they get from the ocean is the water, which they send back to the ocean, which is great. Hawaii's got these exhibits where they use ocean water. It comes into the island, it comes out of the island, and they don't have to do water changes because it's all from the ocean. It's very convenient. But so yeah, there are certain people that are perfect for this. There are others that would like to do more. And then there's the groups like Coral Restoration Foundation. And there's the other one in Bonaire, Reef Restoration. And they are planting corals on the reef and they're putting things in the ocean to become a reef that they plant the corals on. Like if they sink something, like a big ship or an airplane or something, it's just on the bottom of the ocean, and the corals grow all over it, and the fish live inside the hull because it's a place of safety. If you're a scuba diver, you see this yourself. You go out into the ocean, it's all water, there's nothing to see. But whenever there's any kind of a structure of any kind, and you swim up to it, there's some kind of life near it. There's very few things that are just out in the wide open, out in the open. Usually it's something migrating from here, from this structure, to that structure. And so they will be going across and you might happen to see it. And some do this at night in the cover of darkness, and others do it during the daytime, or some just get lost. So there's a lot going on, and there's always more we can do. Savannah says, we watched you dose for red bugs 3 times. Then you put new corals in. Do you have to dose again now and wait, or only if you see them? Only if you see them. And Ryan hasn't seen any red bugs in his tank. I did dip everything, so there shouldn't be any concern. One of the things I used to do when red bugs were present, or not present, prolific, dominant, I mean, they were everywhere. Everyone seemed to have them. I would have a small 14-gallon cube in my fish room that was always running. And any new frags I got went into that tank, and I took one tablet of Interceptor and I crushed it into powder like you saw in the videos, and I put it in one of those little vials like the Elos test kit has that has the plastic cap, and that was my vial of the Interceptor. And then my tank, remember, one tablet treats 400 gallons, and I never bothered to like figure out how to get enough of the dust to only treat 14 gallons. But I used the smallest spoon that was in my Salifer test kit, just a little tiny, like 0.15 ml, I think it is. That little tiny scoop of that powder mixed in some water, and I poured it into the tank, and 12 hours later, I knew I could take the coral out of there and put it in my reef. And I did that for a long time, but red bugs are just, they're a nothing. They're a flea. They didn't cause any kind of major damage, but it was only recently when I was taking a macro shot and I saw this one coral and it had like 200 on it. And I was like, okay, that's bad. And I'm thinking it's because so many SPS died, they all migrated to the one last SPS they could find. So I did treat the tanks specifically to target them, get rid of them, and they're gone. And yes, so my thought process would be anything else I get. You know, like with Ryan, he knew he didn't have red bugs, so that wasn't a concern. If Dwayne says, yeah, there's a chance I have red bugs, I could do what I described, and I could actually put those new corals from Dwayne inside a system for 12 hours with Interceptor, and then they'd be ready to move into the system. I could still dip them, but then put them in the thing with Interceptor. Or do the Interceptor first, and then after a day, then dip them and then put them into the tank. There's lots of options. Jesse says, should you quarantine cleanup crews? Can they carry pests? I'm going to say no. And I'm sure someone out there will disagree with me and say that's not true. But I've never quarantined any cleanup crew ever in the history of my hobby. When I get a cleanup crew, their job is to clean up. And when I get them from wherever they come from, they're usually in a tank of themselves. The Astrias are in one tank, the hermit crabs are in another tank, the cerats are in another tank, then you've got other things like cleaner shrimp and urchins and all that. And they never have fish in those systems, so you don't have fish disease to worry about. You may find something on the shell of one of those creatures, like the one I got from Reef Cleaners. It was a type of algae, and in my video I picked it off, but they contacted me because they watched my video and said, yeah, you didn't have to worry about that one. I was like, yeah, I probably didn't either. I kind of figured you wouldn't send it if it was a thing, you know. But I did pluck that off in that one case to remove it. But it's not a... these guys are cleaning themselves. If you ever notice when you get a cleanup crew, they're clean. They don't have disgusting shells. They're not covered in hair algae because they're in a tank by themselves as a group, and they're looking for food, and there's nothing to eat in there. It's not like they have a dirty tank to live in. These systems are clean. They fill them up with cleanup crew. The cleanup crew is looking for something to eat. What can they eat? The things off the shells of their buddies. So they're all cleaning each other, and when you get your brand new snails, all their shells are white. Everything's clean. So no, I've not done it. You can't dip them, first of all. So I don't quarantine them. I just look at them. If there's anything that has a question, like, wait, what is this? That's different. Then I'll take a picture and I'll ask a question. But invariably, everything just goes in the tank. Savannah says, is it possible to raise the fry from skunk cleaner shrimp? Maybe. You're going to have to set up a very specific system, and you're going to have to do some homework to learn how to do it. There are people that have successfully bred and raised peppermint shrimp, and I believe cleaner shrimp. I don't know anyone that's done blood shrimp yet, but probably someone has. But you're going to have to put in a system. As far as I know, it's going to be in a tank, like a 20-gallon long or something, with like a shallow amount of water. And I think a lot of phytoplankton goes in there. And the only thing in there that moves water is an air stone. I mean, that's the little bit of information I happened to glean when I was reading one guy's experience. But I'm sure there's a lot of good information on how to do it. But to just catch them out of your tank and then put them in something and grow them, I don't think it's going to work quite that easily. Michael says, what is the height of the motor housing assembly on the skimmer swabby? I only have 3 or 4 inches above the skimmer cup. What you should do is you should go to Avast Marine's website and see what it says for the latest information. I have the biggest swabby ever, so it has a huge motor on it, but you may have a smaller one that needs a smaller motor, and so the height could be different. But check with them; they'll answer all your questions because they want you to buy something that fits. And Jesse, thank you very much for that super chat. I appreciate it. Yeah, flashlight fish are really cool. So what they have on their cheeks are this fluorescing green coloration. And they have a skin flap that hides it. And they pull it back and it glows. And then they cover it. And they do this. And at the Dallas World Aquarium, there's this huge black tank, you know, in a very dark spot at the end of a hallway. It's probably 1,500 gallons. And you can't see anything. And then all of a sudden you see these little green eyes. They're like ninjas looking at you all over the tank. But then as they blink or they move their cheek flaps, their eyes close. And they're really cool. And she's wanting to raise them, which I think is really neat. All right, decided to clear my throat. Look, guys, we've been going now for 2 hours. I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you so much for tuning in. Sorry we got interrupted there for a few minutes. The building is going up on Monday, and it should be completed Monday night. So I'm very excited. Like I said, if you want to join the channel and pay a monthly donation, it's $5 or $10. You can pick one of those two. Then you get to see some behind the scenes. And other than that, you know, there'll be Reef Diaries to watch, and you know, you'll get to see some stuff that way. And I'll continue to do an edited video when there's time. And I hope you guys have a great weekend. I gotta go. Bye.